Friends, after being in this industry for over 22 years, I'm surprised that I still encounter major first. I always expect to learn something new in this industry. Things are always changing. But every now and then, someone just surprises me with something like, I can't believe that just happened. And that's why I'm sharing this video with you today. If you are thinking of buying or selling a home in the next coming months, I think you really should listen to this video until the very end. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not selling you any of my services. I'm not trying to sell a listing. This is information that if you have intentions of buying or selling a home in the next coming months, or perhaps you're already working with an agent to buy or sell a home, you should still listen to this. Let me share with you, and I'm not going to name any names. I'm not going to share what transaction this is pertaining to. Here's the situation that we are looking at. I work for a seller in this scenario, and there are multiple offers that have been presented to my seller client. I have a conversation with my seller in advance of putting the home on the market to prepare them for any possible scenario. So they're not caught off guard. They don't get overwhelmed with the process, and certainly don't get overexcited about the concept or the idea of just having multiple offers in this market. That is not unexpected. That's nothing new in this market. It doesn't require me to do a lot of extra magical things to make that happen because we're in a seller's market. It's what you do with that is really what matters. So here's what I encountered with this is I counseled my seller, and at some point when you get enough offers and you're taking them as they come in, I never set any kind of due date that all offers must be received by this date when I took the listing. No, what I did is I put the home on the market and I let the buyers look at it. They know what kind of market they're in. If they're working with a seasoned agent, the agent can probably advise them along the way. So I didn't set a deadline just by virtue of putting the home on the market. And we looked at every offer as they came in. And as every offer is coming in, none of them were really stellar offers. They were, above asking, but not necessarily an offer that made my seller say, I have to have that, right? Or I love it a lot if we can maybe make this happen with that offer, which would then warrant a counter offer to any of those offers. So with every offer that came in, we communicated with the buyer's agent that the seller appreciates the offer and is not necessarily ready to respond to that particular offer as written because they do have an abundance of additional showings still scheduled. However, if your client wishes to represent a different type of offer, my seller would gladly take a look at that and give serious consideration because every offer is being considered as they come in. At some point in the process, you have several offers that you have in front of you, and something starts to look really, really good. But so at this point, at my advice, I did advise the seller to just offer highest and best. We still had a few more appointments left, and there were other agents that said they were going to write an offer. And sometimes when they tell you that, they drag their feet, and a day or two might go by. So to push them along as well, we asked for all agents to submit their highest and best offer by a certain time frame. Now here's where it gets a little bit interesting. In me asking for all the agents for their highest and best offer, some of the agents decided to keep their offer the way it was, unchanged, but they left it on the table for consideration. Others went back to the drawing board and rewrote their offer, maybe for more money, or maybe eliminated inspections, or changed some of the terms and conditions of the offer to make it more favorable and enticing to the seller. With that, there were two offers that really truly stood out. They were similar. One was more or higher than the other, but they were very similar offers. And each of them had a different nuance to them that made either one of them very tempting. And the best of both worlds would have been able to combine those couple of different nuances between the two offers into one offer to make it the best offer. Keep in mind, we already asked for highest and best. I shared with the seller a strategy that she thought was a brilliant strategy, so we moved forward with this strategy. And in this strategy, it was to ask the higher offer if they are willing to do what the lower offer was willing to do. And I'm not going to share what those terms and conditions were. And promptly, and I'm not even sure if the agent even asked their client. I don't know, maybe they did. But the response came back quickly, and the answer was no. And I assumed then this must be over with that negotiation. But I pushed a little further, and I picked up the phone and called and said, listen, the seller is this close, literally just this close, to just slightly countering the other offer and is leaning heavily toward that offer for these reasons. I'm just presenting this to you because your offer, if your client could do this, would be the best offer. Rather than taking that information and going back to her client or his client or her client or his client, rather than taking that information and presenting it to their client, that agent then proceeded to try to school me on what highest and best means. And it wasn't trying to school me in a way that was even respectful or productive. It was condescending, it was some yelling, and some words were used that were actually quite improper. They were really just inappropriate words. So it seemed that this particular agent was very emotional. And the agent's response to me was, you can't do that. In all of my years, this is the other agent speaking, in all of my years, I have never encountered where highest and best is asked for, and then you're coming back to me to negotiate further. I thought highest and best meant that's it. You present that and you accept that. If we're the highest offer, why aren't you accepting my client's offer? And I let the agent know that as a courtesy, my client is reaching back to you because the other offer is acceptable as written. The terms of the other offer, even though it was lower, are more favorable to my client. But if your client is willing to modify that particular term, your client would have the best offer. I'm presenting that to you as an opportunity. You can take this opportunity to your client and see if they're willing to do that. And then it's met back with another response, but we already submitted highest and best. So why are you using our offer to pull another offer higher so that you can come back and throw that back to us? I said, well, it's really at the seller's discretion how they want to do that, number one. But number two, that's not what happened in this scenario. The other offer, as written, is acceptable. It's not as high. It is, in fact, their highest and best offer. In the case of your client, it is very close. Just as a term or condition there that the seller would like to see different. And I'm being told constantly that you are not allowed to do that. So I want to share this with you today, that when you are working or you're trying to buy a home, if your agent doesn't understand really how to support you and what you want in the transaction without putting emotion in it, that's number one. This agent was very emotional, said some words that were extremely inappropriate and actually very offensive, very offensive. And I had to pause the conversation to let that agent know that we need to deal with that first. You can't say that to me and expect us to work this out. You need to understand that that's not what's happening, and so therefore that word is not appropriate, and that word should never really be used unless that is actually happening. And that's clearly not what's happening. You're just a little fired up and a little emotional. And number two is, it's never the agent's responsibility or the agent doesn't have the authority, unless given by their client, to just respond and give an answer on behalf of their client. And when I am sharing with them a counter offer, it is an offer. It's an offer from the seller that's being presented to the buyer's agent. In the Code of Ethics, we are required to present all offers as soon as reasonably possible. What is assumed in that is that all offers means offers coming from the buyer. An offer can come from a seller to a buyer. And when you think of it from that perspective, who are we as agents, as a buyer agent, to argue with that counteroffer without presenting it to their client? What's interesting about this is, after that heated conversation, I insisted that that agent go back and present this to their client. Within 5 minutes, I get a phone call back saying yes to the seller's counteroffer. Interestingly enough, that therefore proved that when you ask for highest and best from a series of buyers, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's their highest and best. It's the highest and best that they believe they can do, because that is the extent of what they think they can do. It's really because they have not necessarily invested in 20 plus years in real estate to understand what all of their options could possibly be. And it's up to us as agents to guide that buyer, to help them make a decision as to really what is their highest and best offer in this scenario, or in any scenario. And had that buyer known that they could have done what my seller was countering, they may have presented that in their initial offer in the first place. Keep in mind, I already asked the question before this all happened if they were even willing to do this, and the answer was quickly no, before me making the phone call. That's on the buyer side. So when you're trying to buy a home, I think you got to think about your agent, the level of creativity they may have in the negotiation. And sometimes that creativity and wisdom comes from experience, and sometimes it's just a natural gift, right? Sometimes you just have it. When you have it, you have it, because you can get that gift and experience from other industries. You could have had other types of jobs in your life where, as an agent, you bring that stuff into this industry and you're an amazing negotiator. But when the inventory is low, if your agent can't negotiate without crying or being emotional or name calling and pointing fingers, you're probably at risk of not getting the home that you really truly desire. Now, that's on the buyer side, but on the seller side, look at it from this perspective. I could have advised my client to accept one of the above asking offers early on. I did let her know that, hey, these offers are not bad offers. They're not bad offers. But there is the potential of better, because you still have an enormous amount of appointments and showings, and with every other showing comes another offer. So that tells you that there is certainly value in the property, and everyone seems to think the value is almost around the same. And if you know real estate, most buyers are going to offer something similar, which is what I like to say is the actual real value of any property, right? And then there's one or two outliers that are going to show you that I'm willing to pay you this amount even above that. And it's always going to be that one buyer, one or two buyers are going to offer you this amount well below that. So those are the outliers in real estate, and they exist in almost every scenario. And I wait for those people to come along. If you're a buyer, your agent should understand what that looks like, so you can anticipate what is the average buyer going to do. And then from there, you need to then decide if you want to be average or do you want to be superior. And then if you're competing against an agent like me, I anticipate there's always one other smart guy out there who's thinking, this is the average, let's do this. So I'm going to do this plus one. That's why my buyers win. So that aside, my client got everything she wanted. Why? Because I didn't just say, give me your highest and best offer. I looked at that and I said, give me your highest and best offer. However, let's take these highest and best that are way up here, and let's take that and figure out what's better and what's best for you as a seller. And that's how my client was able to now become I want to say the highest selling one now in her particular area. And this is not the first time I've accomplished this, where I have set some records in some areas. Actually, there's still another record in Montville, Connecticut. I think no one in the neighborhood has done better yet. And I think I almost came close to topping it with another sale after. And we're still in that high market. So that just shows that when you really understand, there's a science behind the negotiation, but there's also a human side of negotiation. People have emotions, there's passion, there's a lot of those things, that emotional connection to the property. Those things matter when you're trying to negotiate. And when you put all of that together, you come up with the best possible offer that you will be so happy you've gotten. And I said all that to say this. Many of you know that there has been so many in the news there with the lawsuits that have been going on, which deals with really the compensation of the buyer's agents, and how that is coming, being paid, and so on, and how that really affects really the bottom line of the seller, because some sellers believe that maybe they don't need to pay a fee to cover the buyer's agent's fee. I just wanted to share this with all of you. I'm not here to give you a specific answer. I'm here to say, before you make a decision on any of those things, ask your agent the hard questions. You'd be surprised that there's so many of us that really are very knowledgeable of how this all works, and maybe can really help you to understand better. My client was so happy to invest in me so that I can invest in her, and would have paid more, literally would have paid more, actually offered to pay more. There's value in what really, really good agents bring to the table. My client expected to sell their property for this number and expected to have to pay these expenses on top of that number to make the transition. I ended up selling the home for this number and took those expenses and threw it away and gave that to the buyer. All of those expenses to the buyer. My client is happy, ecstatic. Take some time to ask some questions of your agent to understand what it is they're bringing to the table. Learn a little bit about what their experience has been, whether they're working as a buyer agent for you or working as a listing agent for you. Who you work with matters.